I went in, I was like, I want a puppy. They sit me down, I'm filling out the questionnaire, and it's like, where do you work? What's the square footage of your backyard? And I'm like sweating. I got halfway through the questionnaire. I was like, this is too much. Like, just put him to sleep. Can't do it.
Welcome to the 1 o'clock panel with Sarah Aswell and Pete Fromm. I'm Deirdre McNamer, and I'm going to moderate this. So I can tell just looking out there that I'm in a room full of sensitive, sharing people. So I feel I'm in a safe space in which I can unburden myself of a nagging sorrow. I recruit MFAs every year, as do my fellow faculty people, and in my case, when I sort of give the nod to someone, it's because I have a hunch, just a hunch, that I'm going to be bragging about them later. Whatever it is they end up doing, there's some kind of originality, oddity, fluency that I like to think I recognize. And then when they do well, which they often and almost always do in different ways, then I can very modestly admit to just like a little bit of influence. Because, after all, the MFA faculty people, we read and respond and advise. We share our best tips. We find them wives and husbands. It's not easy. It's and, in Sarah's case, Sarah was my student 12 years ago. Yeah. She has gone on to become very good and very successful at something I didn't expect, and that's comedy. She also writes wonderful criticism. She writes serious fiction as well, but boy, she's out there with this comedy now. And I just wanted, she's had her humor writing appear in the New Yorker, McSweeney's, National Lampoon. This is big time. And many others, smaller magazines, lots in Reductress. And so she is really has established herself in that realm. But here's my problem as a teacher of Sarah, is that is something I can claim absolutely no credit for. And that just frosts my ass, Sarah. Thank you. That felt good. Okay. Sarah's not young, but she's pretty young. And I'm not old, but I'm pretty old. And handsome Pete Fromm is, I would just call him seasoned. He's younger than I am, older than she is. Pete lives now in Missoula, and I would have known him better by now, I think, but he lived for quite a while in Great Falls, up in north central Montana, where I actually can't go very often because it's too near my hometown of Cut Bank. And I can't get too near Cut Bank because I have a risk of like PTSD episodes. An uncanny fact about Cut Bank is its elevation in feet, its population, and its average wind velocity per hour are all the same number, 3,800. You would get PTSD too. So Pete has really a stellar publishing career. He's 5-time winner of the Pacific Northwest Booksellers Literary Award. His novels, If Not For This, As Cool As I Am movie, and How This All Started, a story collection, Dry Rain, memoir, a lot of range, a lot of excellence. We have had, he does, kind of originally did outdoor writing. It did another a memoir, The Names of the Stars, which is really very different from his fiction. And so he, I think, is a wonderful example of someone who has just built a life doing this steadily over time and doing very well at it. Both of these people are family people. Pete's got 2 sons, married with 2 sons, Sarah, 2 daughters. And they just have these very different skills and different lengths of time doing this hard work intensely. So now I'm just going to jump in with a topic that is dark, fraught, deeply unsettling. I think you should probably just clear the children from the room. And that is making a living. What a buzzkill, right? You know, you're roaring along in the company of your brilliant ideas, your collected energies, the fizz, the love, the potential, and these envelopes keep arriving in the mail demanding money regularly, lots of it. So what do? I'm going to start by asking each of them how you manage this creative writing, food shelter matrix. How do you make it go?
Would you like to start?
I guess neither one of us have an answer.
Okay, bye.
So I, after I graduated from the MFA program here in 2006, I thought the only way that I could make money writing was to be an editor. So I tried to do that. I moved to New York City and got a job as an editorial assistant at a book publishing company, and quickly discovered that writers are not often good editors. We just don't have the same skill set. I mean, I think some do, but definitely not me. Way too spacey and sensitive for that job. So I started freelancing out of my cubicle since I was already doing a bad job at editing anyway. And I slowly got enough clients that I could quit my my job and move back to Montana, because also New York City is not a great place for a spacey, sensitive person. And then for the next 8 years, I did mostly content writing and content strategy, which is sort of, you know, prostituting my skills to pay the bills. And it's not super fun, but it's something that I'm good at and that I can do quickly. And it gives me time to do my creative writing as well. And within the last 2 years, I've been able to sort of, my goal right now is to just move the needle further and further away from content writing and towards my journalism and humor writing. And we're getting close. So that's how I pay the bills.
How did you get into content writing?
By lying a lot about my experience, and by getting rejected a lot, and teaching myself a lot, just reading books about freelancing. And I wanted to say, Dee, that you can take credit for some of my stuff. One of the things that you taught me, and I remember standing in your living room and you were talking to me and several other female writers. You told us that we can't give a shit. And that's still one of my
eloquent.
mantras. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you just have to keep moving forward, I guess.
Good. All right. Pete, how do you make a living? He has a secret.
I've never really, I mean, if you asked anybody who knew me, they'd pretty much say that I don't. At first, I had one writing class here with Bill Kittredge, and he kind of launched me out thinking I knew what I was doing. And I was a seasonal park ranger, and that was a great way to do it. A park ranger job doesn't really involve doing anything. I just floated the Snake River every day, and so I could make stuff up on the river. And then I wrote in the mornings, and then I had 5 months off, and I went up and stayed with friends in Great Falls or Missoula, and just wrote during the winter. And I did that for 7 or 8 years before I submitted anything. Then the last talk about when do you start submitting, I would really say not yet, because you can get shut down pretty quickly by not being confident yet in what you're working on. So it took me about 8 years to get confident enough to start getting rejected, and then get used to that. I used to keep track, but after I was selling a lot of stories, I figured I got rejected 10 times for every story I got accepted. And I think that's still pretty true. I've published a couple hundred stories, so that means if I had paper, I could do the math, but it's like 2,000 rejections, not counting book rejections. So back to making a living, as the seasonal park work kept me, I could feed myself. And another great thing to do is have a partner who has a real job. That's probably actually the most important thing you can do. No, it is the most important. Because as a freelancer, you never know when you're going to get paid. You pretty much do know that if you do get paid, it won't be very much. And so doing a thing like buying a house or having a kid, it helps to have a steady income.
Okay. Well, Sarah, you're married to another graduate of our program, Ben Fawkes, who's a beautiful writer as well. He has been published in Best American Short Stories. He helps raise these little kids. He does a lot of online, basically all of his writing to make a living is online, right? Mm-hmm. He's a sports writer.
Yeah, he works for USA Today as
right.
And gets a regular paycheck, which is super important.
So that's predictable then.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So two people at their computers a lot every day, that's where it comes from. And that wouldn't have been probably easy or possible 15 years ago. And that, I think that's a really good example, these two are, of that you can now pick where you want to live, maybe more freely, and have real work and not have to be a transient necessarily. Pete, what's the worst publishing experience you've ever had?
Oh, Jesus.
You only get one.
God, the catalog is just screwed. I'll start with the best, or one of the best.
Yes, that's a good way. That's more positive. I'm too dark.
The first book I sold, I sent a story collection to a tiny independent publisher in California, and he sent it back saying, "I really like these stories. I'm not going to publish you." And he said, because there's no book buyer in the country goes to a bookstore looking for a name they've never heard of. And he said, try to publish these stories in some magazines first, and then get back to me. And I thought, that's pure genius. You know, I've got like 200 rejections from me trying to publish these in literary magazines. But eventually I sold a few of them and sent the manuscript back to him. And he said, it's still economic suicide for me to do this, but I'm going to do it. And it did well for him. On the bio on the back of the book, it said I once babysat salmon eggs for the Idaho fishing game. A reviewer saw that, didn't review it, but wrote or called me and said, what was that about? And that's how the book Indian Creek started.
Right.
And so that's a big part of the process is you just keep going, and stuff happens. It's sort of like waiting around for lightning, which can be fun too. But then the worst things are having editors, when you sell them, they sell you on them and have tons of promises being made. Oh yeah, we're going big with this one, and you're going to be out on tour for the rest of your life, and you're going to have to put an addition on your house for the money, and then just never hearing from them again.
There's some real black holes out there, aren't they? Just silence on a lot of fronts. So, Sarah, how did you, when you started to do stand-up comedy and humor writing, what did you discover about that in terms of how it meshed with, or didn't, with your earlier sort of creative work?
So I did some comedy writing in undergraduate. My undergraduate studies, I was the editor-in-chief at my humor magazine at Grinnell College. And I had a humor column in the newspaper for 3 out of 4 of my years. But then I decided if I was going to be serious about writing, I would have to be serious, which was a mistake in thought. And when I got to the program, I think I was really scared of being myself. I suddenly had to write serious literature. Yeah, and yeah, I often want to have a redo on that. I think I still learned a lot, but I forgot about the comedy stuff for a long time. Then I was really obsessed with making money and paying off my student loans and being secure financially, and that led to my content writing. Then I had kids and became pretty super depressed. I had 2 really small kids. I was taking care of them during the day when Ben worked, and then I was writing for money at night after they went to bed and in the morning before they got up for many years. And yeah, I never left my house. I was constantly stressed about the kids and work and not doing either of those 2 things well enough. And then Dan Brooks, who's another writer in town, texted me from a bar and said, I dare you to do stand-up comedy with me next month when this open mic comes around again. And I said yes to that and haven't stopped since that point. As soon as I told my first joke on stage, something opened up again, and I was creative again. And that, doing stand-up, you have to write your stand-up set, and I just started writing for fun again and sort of found myself in a way that I hadn't for a really long time. And I still bounce back and forth between writing for the stage and writing for, say, the New Yorker or McSweeney's. I still borrow from both of those acts, and they feed each other, especially if I get stuck writing a stand-up bit. I can just start writing for the page and vice versa, and I can unstick myself.
That's really interesting, and it reminds me of, I was doing freelance magazine writing for quite a while too, and it was after getting my MFA, and I sold a couple of pieces to the New Yorker, the talk of the town. And it's very stylized. There's a very definite way that you write those. It's kind of imperious we then, but then Allure magazine, this fashion magazine, they had a column where they just wanted somebody to write something that was a rant, so it sounds as like and it turned out it wasn't very hard for me at all. When I wrote it the first time, it sounded very New Yorker-ish, it was like very careful and, kind of that wry, distant humor. And then when it was a rant, I just had to pretend I was, you know, 2 drinks in at a party and and really mad about something, and talking to somebody who was really happy to hear me, and it was incredibly liberating, you know. So that when you find actually the lesson in that is that you do have different voices for that you can call up, and sometimes they provide relief for one that is wearing a little thin. It sounds as if that's what's happened for you.
That's exactly right, for sure.
Huh. And Pete, you know, you have memoir, you have stories, you have novels. Do you have a similar sort of moving from one to the other in the interests of maybe rekindling some fire that?
Yeah, I mean, there's, what you just said was great about I think when you come to a place, you study, and the tendency is to try to like assume another voice. Like you're going to be literary now, and I think really stick with your voice, and if you're funny, go for it.
So hard to be.
Richard Ford, he was the judge picking the finalists for the best American short stories, and he was reading them on an airplane. He said, I think he got a couple hundred stories, he said, and he's reading them through. And he said, I flew across the country reading story after story, and I never smiled once. Because, we're so grim and so literary. And you can have super serious literary stuff and also be funny. And it stands out now because everybody's trying to be serious. And but yeah, I change voices all the time, and part of that is, well, it's always for the need of the story, but it's also for the challenge to try something else. Try third person if I've been working in first. Try woman's point of view if I've been writing from a man's point of view. But a lot of that too is just keep a change. You know, okay, now I have a voice, and this if you're going to write in the same voice for the rest of your life, good. You know, you're going to bore the shit out of yourself and everybody else. But just go with what you're working with at the moment, and let that guide the voice.
So, you know, both of you have, everybody has busy lives. Our lives get more busy at certain times, less at others. Have you, I think that when I talk to people who are trying to maintain a steady writing life with a lot of other pressures at once on them, do you have anything to help our busy writers in the audience that's maybe been a discovery that you've had about how to sustain the writing when there are so many distractions and so only a limited amount of energy?
Sanity's not going to help.
No help at all.
My son's
Okay.
got a 20-hour-a-week job right now, and he comes home from it and flops on the couch. He's like, "Oh my God!" And I'm like, "Well, you know, I need some help out back." I'm exhausted. And I'm going to exhaust you. I think everybody's a lot more capable of doing things than my son thinks he is. When you talked about getting up earlier and working and writing into the night, my tactic was to get up earlier. And when my sons were born, they wake up about 6, so I started getting up about 4. And so you could get a few hours in. I know a writer who worked at a grocery store and wrote in his truck at lunch break. And you have to fit it in, and you have to go for it, and you got to treat it like it's a job. Part of the big thing, besides having a wife who makes money, I have Catholic guilt. And so when she went out to work in the morning, I couldn't just say, "What a great day to go fishing," because I'm terrified of her. if she ever caught me. And so I worked, like, she's going to work, I'm going to work. And I think that's a way, that, you know, if you sit around waiting for inspiration, even if it does hit, you're not going to be ready for it. So you just, you know, you got to do it every day and put the time in, and even when you don't feel like it. Even if you go to the party that night, you know, that was something I always said, you know, it was up till 2, I'm going to get up at 4 and I'm going to work. And that helps.
One of the things that helps me most is accountability, sort of creating accountability in your life through different means. I'm a member of an online accountability group for female comedy writers, and we sort of keep on each other's butts. And also, we send in links whenever we publish something, and that kind of makes you feel bad if you haven't posted a link in a while. So I really recommend finding people who are doing what you're doing and making sure that you are encouraging each other. I also have an in-person writing group in Missoula that's a huge help, who are all MFA grads, and we've been together reading each other's stuff for many, many years now. And again, you know, I think shame really helps me move forward. Well, you have to know what works. Well, didn't they do a study like about like one of the best ways you can lose weight is if you have to pay someone if you don't lose the pounds? Like, I feel like I need that sort of negative influence in my life all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, and also agreeing to do things before you've done the work to do them is a great way to force yourself to get them done. Like
So
agreeing to comedy shows when you don't have material, for example. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's an amazing lesson that when you create occasions in your life that you have to rise to, you do it. You know, and you'd say to yourself, "Oh, why did I commit to this? Why am I, you know, why can I not go on my vacation unless I have 3 chapters done?" You know, that sort of thing, just these strictures. And it's hard because you're doing it alone. You're kind of talking to yourself a lot of the time. But you're both saying sort of the same thing, is you just put it out there that that's the task. And then some days you may feel more or less up for it, right? But you do it. Okay.
Yeah, even when you're not up for it.
Yes.
Because it's the easiest thing to take a vacation from. And taking a vacation starts to be a longer vacation. And then it's a longer vacation. If you don't skip, you can keep rolling.
Alice Munro, I read somewhere, writes, or has for many years, writes 3 hours a day and walks 3 miles. That's the 2 things she has to do. And she has to bank them. So if she goes on a trip, or she goes to a conference, she goes somewhere, she has to have the hours and the miles in the bank before she goes, which seems sort of the opposite of the spontaneous artist, you know? I mean, it's so grinchy, essentially. But that I think seems to be how it gets done, if it gets done.
Yeah, this is not going to make you any more normal.
You keep saying that. You must
Just
have.
imagine at a party, I've got to go, I'm banking my hours.
Right.
You're doing what?
Okay, so you have little kids, you have mostly grown kids. What advice would you give to them if they come to you and say, I don't know, I just feel like I have to be a writer? What are you going to say? You fool!
My son could be, he's got time.
It's got the time.
Man.
Yeah.
I know it's kind of a horrific vision, but they might.
Yeah, actually, I have one that might. And if this is my biggest advice for like making a living at it is don't try to make a living at it. Do it because find the reward in the work. If you're so jazzed because you broke through that scene today, or it's like, wow, I think she's starting to come to life, and if that's what brings you back the next day, that's great. And that's, I mean, I've been writing that way for 30 years, and I finish a book and it doesn't sell for years or ever, but I just start the next one. And because if you're tying your feeling of success or worth to what you're going to make out of this, as far as money goes, or awards or any other thing, that can take a long time. I just sold a book last week. So for like 2 days, I was like, check that shit out. Woohoo! And my son, who's a business major, not going to be a writer, I told him about it. And he's like, when did you start that? It's about 6 years ago. And okay, and when did they start trying to sell it? Well, almost exactly a year ago. All right, how much did you get? And I told him, and he just, okay, so that works down to like, almost $1 a day. And I said, well, this is a weird contract because it has a bonus. If I sell more than 5,000 copies in a year, I get a $2,000 bonus. All right, $1.25. So, but seriously, if it's the work that's driving you to do it, and you get the reward out of doing the work, making money is just extra. And that's what I tell my kid. If that's what you want to do, and that's what you're jazzed about, go for it, because you never know what'll happen after that.
What about your little girls? They're very beautiful and fierce looking.
They're so beautiful
How
and
old are they?
fierce. They're 3 and 5. They just turned 3 and 5. Yeah, so Stephen King came through last year, I guess, and I got to meet him and his son because I was introducing him before his talk. And they were talking about Owen becoming a writer after growing up in Stephen King's house. And Stephen King said something that I thought was great, which was that if Owen had grown up in that house and seen how tough the life is, even when they're financially successful, and that Owen saw him and his wife working every day and being frustrated and going through all the difficult parts, that Stephen King knew that his son could do it and be a happy, successful writer because he had already seen what the life is really like. I think a lot of people don't know that it's not glamorous, even for Stephen King. Like, Stephen King's like, ugh,
Yeah.
I wouldn't choose it.
Give this a lot of thought.
But yeah, I mean, I grew up, my parents are both scientists, and there was a lot of pressure on me to be a doctor growing up, which is hilarious. I would be the worst doctor on earth. I would just kill the first person who walked into my office. But they pressured me a lot. Until I was in college, I was a biology major for my first 2 years, which is hilarious. So I would never try to guide them away from what they were passionate about. Mm-hmm. If you want to be a writer, you're going to be one.
Go do it. All right, well, so I know there are people in the audience who probably want to pick their brains a bit. I think you can just shout out a question. That should work as well as anything. Yeah.
I know we're talking about the sacrifices that we make, but it's about I think life's about enjoying life as well. So how do you balance that? Because I found after I did the getting up early for 2 years to finish my first book, and in turn I've kind of turned into a workaholic. And so I don't know how to go back to just enjoying my life.
So how do you balance a really stringent work program with, you know, the value of some pleasure in your life?
I really love what I do. I think doing stand-up is one way that I find balance. It forces me out of the house, which is really good. It forces me to a fun place where people are having fun and there's laughter. And it also happens after hours, after my kids go to bed. It's still, years later, feels like I'm sneaking out of the house and going to do something that's, you know, strange and
Transgressive.
yeah, it really feels that way. And then I sneak back in at 3 a.m.
Mommy!
And then I've got breakfast at 6, you know, and with mascara all over my face. So I think you have to find the joy in the work. But I also don't think there's a good answer. I think that I struggle with that a lot. I can't really sit down in my house very well without, you know, cleaning something or worrying about what I could be doing. So I don't know. Do you know?
How about
Have
you?
you figured out?
Well, yeah, sort of what I was trying to say before about finding the joy in the work. You know, I don't set an alarm to get up in the morning. If I wake up and start thinking, I know I'm not going to go back to sleep, and I'm jazzed to start working every day. I want to find out what's going to happen. So it's not like, oh, I got to force myself through this drudgery. I'd like to do it, and so that helps a ton. But also, you know, that whole idea of, you know, writing's hard work. You stare at the page till the blood drops out of your pores. Fuck that. You know, it's hard to do well, but we're not hard rock mining. You know, we're not going down the tubes in Butte, and you know, this is just. You know, you're sitting around doing something nobody wants you to do. And so enjoy it. But it does, it wears you out. I mean, if I can't write more than about 4 or 5 hours. And so I find myself screaming at my son about bitching about a half-time job, which is about what I have. And because the rest of the day, you can't really keep that concentration. You just get stupid. So then go fishing.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question for Sarah. You talked about moving the needle from content to creative. Do you have any advice for us who might still have our needle strictly in that content world? How can we better market ourselves and start moving towards the path you're on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first panel was talking a lot about just getting used to rejection, but to continue to put yourself out there. I highly recommend stalking people on Twitter is one of my best, to just find the editors, find the publications you like, then Google the editors, then stalk them on Twitter. And you'll be surprised at how often they're looking for stuff. I think there's a misconception that the best publications out there are getting way too much stuff and they're overwhelmed, they don't want to hear from you. They're always looking for good writing. Sometimes I just get on Twitter and I'll search the word pitch, and you have to deal with a lot of baseball bullshit, but there are editors on Twitter saying, I want your pitch, send me your pitch. They're actively looking to publish great stuff. I've gotten tons of work that way. And then after that, you establish a relationship with them, and it gets way easier. But yeah, also just being confident and believing in yourself, I think, especially for women. I see a lot of women writers who don't think that they can even pitch at some of these places, but it's just not true. Just nobody's more different or special than you. You can pitch. and you have to pitch a lot and deal with a lot of rejection. Again, I think stand-up comedy helps because sometimes you get rejected on stage in real time, which is really crazy. Like the first time I bombed, you literally have a room full of people staring at you silently and wondering why you're up there. After that, getting a note in your email box is not too bad. Like, thanks for not booing. That's great.
I like what your remark about nobody is you. You know, I think people forget that a lot, writers do, that there is no one who sees the world the way that you do. And then you fold in other, training and a gift and reading and support and all these other factors, but that's what you have. And that should be valued and considered an arrow in your quiver, as much as any of the other ones, is that, you see the world the way that you see the world. And Sarah has incorporated that clearly. And that this idea of just flat out rejection, that's what I was always terrified to watch stand-up comedy, just empathetically. I'm always afraid that's going to happen. And then, but when I was watching Sarah's clip the other day, I just saw how exhilarating it could be and how kind of free feeling it could be and how it loosens up audiences. But it's risky.
Well,
Right?
it's risky, but it's not, because I was always afraid of bombing before it happened. And then I bombed for the first time, which happens to every comic, no matter how good they are, even me. And the thing that was exhilarating about bombing is that it was over, and I beelined to the bar and got a huge drink. And then I got drunk, went to the bathroom, dropped my cell phone in the toilet. But that's all that happened. There was no... There was
No death threats. No.
There was nothing happened that was bad after the cell phone thing. Like, it was just something that happened. Everyone forgot. It's not like people were looking at me the next day on the sidewalk. There's no consequences to trying. There's only consequences to not trying at all.
Right. And that seems also just to, you seem to be saying that it's clear. You have to stay limber. You have to stay elastic in any facet of this. If you're writing, somber short stories, if you're doing stand-up comedy, if you're doing a memoir, you have to keep your eyes open and stay loose, I think. Just you watch somebody like Fred Astaire dancing, and it's impeccable, but what I've always noticed is that his hands are completely loose. And that when somebody really knows what they're doing, there is that quality to the effort, I think.
And I've never learned anything from doing a great job on stage. I only learn things when I suck at it. That's when I learn my lessons.
Right. Interesting. Other question, maybe one or two more. Yeah.
Journals, or have you throughout your life, journaling? Like diaries or anything?
Do you?
No. To me, it's just like going back to work. I write as much as I can during the day, and so then to write about what I did during the day, well, first it'd be pretty boring. I wrote, but the only times that's not true are when I've spent long stretches in the wilderness. The first time I didn't know it would turn into a book. The second time I guessed it probably would. But there I took notes thinking, for a book, but not every day.
Sarah, do you?
I keep kind of a non-traditional journal of, I guess it would probably be called a joke book more, but I've kept it since, I guess, 1999, so that's a long time. But yeah, it's more thoughts I might write about an article I read or something that I've been feeling. It's not like a, had tuna fish today type of thing.
or here's where I am in life.
Right. No, yeah, it's not as self-reflective, but I do keep a journal thing.
The thing I do keep is if a story idea comes to me, or an image sticks out, or a line of dialogue, I do write that down and go back to that when it's time to start a new story. Or sometimes just writing it down gets it going.
And I have an app on my phone too, where I write insights and keep them organized on my phone. Some of them don't make sense, but when I look back at them.
Okay, one more. Kima?
In a duo writing household, what happens to the kids if you both have a deadline? Like, or your deadlines are piggybacking, or if someone's sick and still the kids, how do you do that?
Dual writing household, what happens to the kids when everybody's on a deadline?
I'm really lucky I have a feminist husband who is totally rad, so we try to treat things pretty equally in that sense, which means we kind of tag team. Like if I get screwed by a deadline this week, then next week he'll get screwed in turn. But also he has a real job that he has to show up to. So often I am still the person who, say if one of the kids is sick, I'll take the day off because I don't have the same strict schedule that he does. But it's still hard. There's still fights.
Kids figured out to like leave me alone for 45 minutes. Can you do that?
I can't work with my kids in the house if they're awake. I can't. I need like to quiet and concentrate, so.
One more?
Very related to that actually. It's just like within the context of like a relationship, you guys both have families, you both have kids, and the fact that one of your partner might have like a normal job and then you have like this really weird job. How do you manage like the conflict that inevitably comes out of that, where they come home and you have to get your writing hours in for the day, and you also got to take care of kids stuff and decompress and all that kind of stuff?
I just do what she says. Man, just however you work your way through any relationship. I'd always try to be done with the writing and not, it's done, it's put away before she came home. The boys went to daycare from 8 to noon from the time they were 2 till they started school. So I was done at noon because I didn't want to do that thing, stay away from me, I'm working. And so just sort of try to separate it out. And then she gets it if, I'm crushing to try to finish a book or something. It hasn't been a huge deal.
I totally agree with what you said about not putting away the writing when your kids need attention. I think that it harms both things if you try to mix them up too much. Sometimes you have to. Like both my husband and I often get calls for interviews to interview, other people at weird hours, and we just have to, get it done. But again, I don't think there's a great answer. It's hard.
It's hard.
We
Yeah,
fight.
we're two people who both get it. My wife's an engineer. She doesn't get it. But she's like, yeah, what you do is different. And so when I'm really working hard on a novel in particular, where you're sort of the same people for several years, sometimes she'll say something and it just, boom, and I'll zing her with something that Maddie would have said. And she'll just look at me and go, that was somebody else, right? Absolutely. So, yeah, they've got to be on board with it, whether they're into it or, that's what they do too, or if it's totally foreign to them. If you guys are together and you're cool, they're going to say, yeah, that's what you do, go for it.
A lot of uneasiness just comes with the territory, I think. You know, I mean, two writers, if one has a hit, one, does well and the other isn't, and you're struggling. I mean, it goes like, that's another thing that can just go on and on and on. And you really do have to take your own emotional temperature in a way and ask yourself if you can tolerate that degree of uneasiness, because it will be there, I mean, all the time, and tiredness, right?
Yes.
All right, thank you all for coming.